Hello everyone, welcome back to another video, and today we are going to be doing just a brief summary for the jobs of Final Fantasy XIV. Now, with so many new players flocking to Eorzea in recent days, especially with Endwalker just around the corner, I thought I'd help out and get a few introduction videos to help new players get started. I already came out with a video explaining a few tips that I think would make the game easier to understand, and if you want to watch it, just click on right down here below and check that out if you're interested. But today we're going to be going over the different jobs that we have currently in the game. As of right now in the game, there are 18 combat jobs, 8 crafting classes, and 3 gathering classes. We will be having the additions of both Sage, which will be a healer job, and Reaper, which is a DPS. Those will be coming out when Endwalker does, but this is just going to be talking over the current jobs that we have right now, so I hope you enjoy them. As a reminder, before we go any further, one of the best things about Final Fantasy XIV is that you can play any of the jobs that you want all on one character, whereas in some games require you to actually make a brand new character for every job, whereas here all you need to do is just switch out your weapons and just set up gear sets for your character. If you need a demonstration, this is my character Claire, who will be happy to show off any of the jobs for you. So this video is only going to be talking about the 18 combat classes that we currently have. So for these jobs, they're actually separated into one of 3 different roles. You got your tanks, whose job is to keep the enemies from attacking other party members and can take a lot of damage. Healers, who heal the other players, and DPS that are the main damage dealers. I just usually think of them as DPS, as damage per second. Now, when you start off in the game, you are asked to pick a starting class, and depending on which one you choose will determine what city you start off with. If you choose the Marauder, Rogue, or the Arcanist, then you start off with the Maritime city of Limsa Lominsa. If you choose either Archer, Lancer, or Conjurer, you'll start off in the forest city of Gridania, and if you choose either Gladiator, Pugilist, or Thaumaturge, you'll start off in the desert city of Udal. These really don't have any kind of effect on you at the cities that you first visit, so I would not pay any kind of real attention to them when you first start off. And if you decide later on that you'd rather not play your starting job anymore and test out some of the others, then you are completely open to do so. So the ones I just mentioned, those are just the ones that you can start off with. We do have other jobs that you have to be at least a certain level to be able to unlock it. For the Dark Knights, Machinist, and Astrologian, you have to be at least a level 50 in another job and have the Heavensward expansion, because you have to visit the city of Ishgard to unlock them. Whereas we have the Red Mage and the Samurai, then you can just unlock at level 60. And finally, there's Dancer and Gunbreaker that require you to be at least level 70 in another job before you can unlock them. Oh, and then there's the Blue Mage that you also have to be at least a level 50 in one job and have completed the 2.0 main scenario quests. But moving on, let's go ahead and just start off with the tanks. So for tanks, like I said before, they are like living, breathing tanks that can take on the blunt force of any kind of damage in battle. They have 2 different stances. One here is known as Tank Stance, and it is important to remember to always turn this on whether you either enter a dungeon or trial, otherwise you're going to have a hard time keeping the enemy focused on you. Just think of this ability that turns your tank into like a literal brick wall that protects the party. They take hold of the enemies and they turn them around away from the rest of the party. You keep them focused on you and trust in your own defense and the skills of the healer to keep you alive while the damage dealers attack from the sides. As for their stats, tanks can deal a pretty decent damage, nothing like a DPS can do, but their best stat is by far the defense. Their main role is not really to do damage, but to protect other party members and then racing through dungeons and trials. In this game, we have 4 tanks altogether. We'll start off with the Paladin. So Paladin is a very classic sword and shield tanking class. It's very easy to understand. When you first start off with this job, you start by unlocking the Gladiator when you first play through the story quests. For Gladiator, you have to be at least a level 30, and then you can upgrade it to the Paladin. They specialize in creating shields and protective moves to help your party members. And they can even use magic to a degree because they can heal themselves in little bursts and have magical attacks against their foes. All in all, it's a very comfortable, very well-rounded job to start off with, especially if you are just getting into tanking. Next up, we have the Warrior. This here is a tanking job that actually uses a giant axe to fight with. Usually, you would think of them as really more of another DPS jobs, and they actually do pretty good damage. But no, that's not the case here. When you start off with the warrior, you are first a marauder, and then you can later upgrade it to a warrior at level 30. This job carries around a heavy axe and isn't afraid to get their hands dirty. They rely upon the power of the inner beast, such as how a berserker would, and they actually deal out really high damage. They used to be like the number one tanking class to go to until some of the changes have been made to it, unfortunately. They do have a couple of tricks to improve their defenses, not as good as a paladin, but they are some of the strongest damage dealers when it comes to at least the tanks. You like edgy warriors that carry around big-ass swords? Well, look no further. Dark Knight can be a bit of a complicated job to use, but once you master it, you will love the power to fight with your own inner darkness. This job can be unlocked in Ishgard when you reach level 50 in any other job, and by far is the best of all the storylines for the jobs. It is beloved by all, and you can actually use your own inner darkness to use up a lot of really cool effects, such as being able to summon up said inner darkness as a kind of shadow clone to help fight alongside you for a brief time. Now, in order to be successful with this job, it does follow a certain kind of combo that you have to play in the right order if you want to use them to your more powerful attacks, and can get a little while of getting used to. But otherwise, why would you ever want to use another tanking class when the story for it alone is amazing? Well, we could have a look at the final tanking job, which is Gunbreaker. So Gunbreaker is the latest tanking job to come out with Shadowbringers, and you have to be level 70 and unlock it in Gridania. They use gun blades, and they are great to use for players who want to do a fair amount of damage but still have pretty good defense. To use this job, though, is probably the most complicated of all the tanking jobs to really get used to, probably because it is the latest tank. Once in tank stance, it's normally pretty easy to get everyone's attention to start off with, but to be able to use all of the attacks in order can be hard to remember if you've never tanked before. So probably not the best job for beginners. They're able to use certain cartridges that are able to do damage, and the more that you use up, the more attacks that you can use in sequence. You will have to do them in a certain order to really get the full advantage of them, but they are able to tank and do amazing bouts of damage as well. So now let's move on straight into the art of healing. Now, as I said before, healer jobs are, well, they heal. That's their main purpose. And they're a really good class to start off with if you're just starting to get into the game and maybe you're afraid to go out into battle for the first time. But I will say this, if you are queuing up to get into a dungeon, tanks and healers get in almost right away all the time. So it's also a really good way to actually get right into dungeon hopping and everything. But again, I have to remind you that healing is their main role. As such, the damage that they deal can be a little bit on the low side. So in the game we have 3 healers so far, with Sage going to be the 4th one when it comes out in Endwalker. Let's just start off first with the White Mage. It's a classic job in all of Final Fantasy, and probably the best choice to start off with if you're new to healing. You start off as a Conjurer, and at level 30 you can upgrade to a White Mage. So no other healer in the game has the sheer raw healing power that comes along with the White Mage, and it's always welcomed in any party. They have a wide range of healing and protective spells for their party members, and they aren't shy about showing them off. They're probably the flashiest job here. They also do pretty good AoE damage in the right situation. Those who master healing can very easily not only heal their party members, but also deal out damage in battle, which will give you major points to your members as well. It is probably the most straightforward and easy job to understand the basics of healing, and I do encourage you to start off with this job if you are interested in starting to heal. Next up is the Scholar. So this is a very challenging class to be able to master. You start off with the Arcanist class, which is unique in and of itself because it's what has a branched evolution, meaning that you can become both a DPS and a healer after you reach level 30. The Summoner is the DPS job, and we'll get to that job in a moment, but the healer is the Scholar. And part of that challenge here is that you have to be able to juggle a pet's abilities with your own. Scholar is able to summon 2 different types of healing fairies to their side who can heal and boost up their party members. While they are limited in terms of what kind of attacks they can use, they can actually do pretty good damage and damage over time spells once you get the handle of juggling the damage dealing and the healing. This job is really all about shielding and boosting up your party members while also weakening your foes over time. So if you're able to master this job, you will be really able to impress those around you. And finally, we have the Astrologian. This is a cool job that can only be unlocked at level 50 and you're an Ishgard. But they are able to perform a wide range of attacks based on the cards they pull from a Floating Tariot deck. Whereas the White Mage likes to use very simple healing spells, Astrologian is a lot trickier because they place just as much emphasis on damage mitigation as well, much like the Scholar job. This is a really good balance of both of those jobs by pulling the cards from the deck, and you can determine what kind of effects you can use and help out the party members, and also defending them on different sets. That you can also determine how much healing and damage mitigation is dealt at the party. It's probably not the best job to start off with if you're just getting into healing, but it's probably a really good balance between both the White Mage and the Scholar jobs. You'll be both bedazzled and impressed with how easy it is to keep everyone up and going with this particular job. Right, so now we're moving on to the damage dealers, the DPS. Now this role is much bigger than the others, and so we have a wide range of different types of DPS. So we have the melee, the magical, and the ranged. The melee jobs are those who like to get up close and personal damage. The ranged ones are those who attack physically from a distance, and then the magical who deal with magical attacks either up close but mostly from a distance as well. So let's start off with the melee, where we have 4 melee damage dealers. We have Monk, Dragoon, Ninja, and Samurai. We will have another melee joining us in the form of the Reaper later on when Endwalker comes out, so that's a lot to live up to. Monk is one of the best damage dealers in the game, and unlike others that have sharp and pointy weapons, this is all about turning your whole body into a weapon. Like to punch things? Like to give a good ass kicking? This is probably your class then. This job starts off as a pugilist and becomes a monk at level 30, and it uses your own fists or claws and a string of martial arts to bring down their foes. It's a really good class to start off with as well if you enjoy dealing out damage, but you need to keep in mind that many of the strongest abilities require you to use a certain string of attacks in a certain order and even stand at a very specific spot with an enemy to deal out max damage. Dragoon is a classic one as well and uses lances to fight with and probably has some of the flashiest and coolest looking attacks in the game. You start off by becoming a lancer and then upgrading to Dragoon later on at level 30. Due to previous games and how lame it used to be, Dragoons tend to get made fun of a lot. Since some of these attacks lock them into certain animations, it can lead to becoming kind of complicated situations where they're even able to accidentally leap off a platform if they're standing too close to it. So be wary of that. But out of all of the melee, they probably deal out the most damage, and in the right hands you can use the power of the inner dragon to throw through your body and deal devastating jump attacks. There's no coincidence that when you have a full limit bar, it's almost looked to the Dragoon to use it since their damage is out of this world. Next up, we have the Ninja, who is a fast-paced and very deadly damage-dealing class to use. You start off as a rogue and then upgrade it to Ninja later on at level 30, like most of the other beginner classes. Now, this one is a bit unforgiving in terms of some of the ninja skills. You start off by sort of spelling out words with the characters Ten, Chi, and Jin, and depending on what order you use them can determine what attacks will be used. You can actually use a wide range of different types of attacks: single target damage, AoE damage, teleporting from one side to the other. Heads up here though, if you do mess up like one of the orders, you end up getting a cute little bunny on top of your head. It's the bunny of shame, so that only lasts for a few seconds, but that's a very good thing to keep an eye on. You can also use other sneak attacks which let you disappear, and you can use this to sneak around other areas even with stronger monsters. Sure, you move at a snail's pace, but you can teleport short distances, and once mastering these orders, you can actually use a range of secret techniques to destroy your foes. And now we move on to the final melee DPS, and that is the Samurai. This is considered to be a selfish job because unlike most of the other DPS jobs, this one really doesn't have any ways to boost or aid your fellow party members. It does ridiculously good damage, and it's a pretty simple rotation to be able to use once you understand how the basics work. By using the katana, and depending on whatever kind of string of attacks you use, you get a special symbol here, and depending on how many of these symbols, you can actually use them to perform powerful attacks depending on the situation. They have a wide range of attacks that can be used to improve your own skills, your own techniques, increase strength, and other attacks. So while there isn't much unity for the rest of the group, no one will turn down a skilled samurai in your group since the damage they deal makes up for that. So those are all the jobs that we have for melee. So let's move on to the 3 range DPS next, the ones that attack from a distance. So first up will be the classic Bard. Bard starts off as an archer, but upgrades to Bard at level 30, just like the other starter jobs. And of course, it uses a bow to attack with. It is fun to be able to shoot things full of arrows, but you should be aware that the Bard's damage is pretty low compared to the others. This job is definitely way more into supporting your teammates than actually doing the damage. They're able to perform several songs that can boost damage dealing or stats for others, as well as doing a few damage over time moves such as poisoned arrows. If you're just getting into the idea of DPS, this one is one of the best ones to start off with while just getting a feel for it. It's simple, it's easy to understand, and you're able to actually learn and grow from that. They're not as flexible as they used to be, but it's still a great job to really get into the game, especially with all the nostalgia that comes from it. Next up, we have the Machinist, which you unlock at level 50 in Ishgard. Now, if you like shooting guns in a fantasy MMORPG, then you can't really get any better than the Machinist. This here uses a specialized gun to attack from a distance, and they actually do really good damage. When they first came out in Heaven's Ward, they were rather underwhelming, but after several expansions and a lot of work, Machinist has really turned into one of the heaviest hitters, or at the least the range DPS that does the most damage. Not only can they use guns, they actually use things like drills and cannons, and they can even summon up their own little robot at their side for brief periods of time. Can be a little bit complicated at first, but this is a job that is a really good contender. And finally, we have the latest addition to not just the range DPS, but also as a DPS in general, and that's the Dancer. Dancer has been a job that everyone has wanted for a long time and have all been convinced that it was going to be a healing job at one point. But after playing as a Dancer, I can honestly say that I love what they did with it. This is a job that you can dance with and sling it around deadly bladed chakrams while you're doing it. You unlock it when you're already reached up to level 70 with another job, and you just head off to Limsa Lominsa. It's probably my favorite range DPS so far, and it's fun while you're able to choose your own dance partner and performing different dances in certain orders to help out your partner. The damage that it does is, it's not as high as the Machinist, but it's definitely better than Bard. And they also have several supporting moves that you can actually help out not just your dance partner, but the entire group. It is a little bit tricky, especially when you're just learning the certain orders to be able to take these dance steps in. Can take a little time to get used to it, so maybe not the best job to start off with playing it, but heck, it's a lot of fun to play once you do unlock it. Alright, so we're almost done now, so we're going into the last category for DPS, and that is the magical DPS. So these guys tend to be the most destructive DPSs in the games in terms of sheer power. They use magic and usually tend to attack from a distance, so if you are looking for a job that leaves a lot of flashy explosions, look no further. We'll start off with the Black Mage, which starts off as a thaumaturge and then levels up to a Black Mage at 30, which is another classic job. This job is all about explosions and can be utterly devastating, perhaps the heaviest damage dealers in the entire game, usually using spells of ice and fire that you have to switch to in the middle of battle. But be warned, this does have somewhat complicated rotations to keep up in order for it to be truly effective. Also, Black Mages really aren't able to move around that often because their spells do take some time to cast, and should they move when their spell is interrupted, then you'll have to start over again. This can be a little bit of a pain, especially when you're dealing with some of the stronger bosses later on in the game, especially since Black Mages don't have the highest defenses. You always have to be aware of your surroundings when fighting as a Black Mage, but in terms of sheer destructive power with staffs, Black Mage does deliver. Next up is my own personal main, and that is the Summoner. Summoners are the second job that you can upgrade to from Arcanist, the other being the Scholar, which we already talked about. You can upgrade to Summoner once Arcanist is level 30 and just complete a different series of quests than the Scholar. This job, as its name suggests, is all about summoning creatures to fight for you. You get 3 pets that you can summon out known as Eggies, and each one of these has their own strand of abilities and attacks to master. Summoner has gotten much stronger than it used to be and does pretty decent damage as well as heavy damage over time abilities. The more that you use this job, the more that you can learn how to balance the different abilities of both you and your pets have, and can deal out a lot of damage over time after the other, especially after learning to harness some of your bigger summons like both Bahamut and Phoenix, which you can bring out for short periods of time. While its healing is pretty low, so I wouldn't rely upon it, it is one of the 2 non-healing jobs that are able to resurrect a KO'd party member. Always good to have one in the party. Speaking of a job that can resurrect, we have the Red Mage. Red Mage can be unlocked in Udal at level 60, and this is a job that is like a jack-of-all-trades job. This job wields rapiers and has a mix of both melee and ranged magical DPS to be able to attack. Like with summoners, they also resurrect players, but their healing is much better. It's not as good as a healing job, definitely better than the summoner, and they work in a pinch if they have to. This is another job that can be a little tricky to play since they have specific rotations to be able to balance out their many abilities. It's usually good to stay back, attack with spells before jumping in to attack with their blades, and then leap away again to do the finishing move. They have a range of white and black magic that, while not as effective as their original jobs, they are perfectly well-rounded so that they include a little bit of everything. So if you want a job like that, then you can't find one better than the Red Mage. And finally, that leads us to the last job to talk about, and that's the Blue Mage. Blue Mage is unique in many ways in that, while not a starting job, you do start off with level 1. However, you have to at least be a level 50 in another job and complete the main scenario quest for 2.0 before it becomes available, and you'll understand why. Blue Mage is another classic from other games because the job that lets you learn spells and moves from different monsters, and this is the same here. You go out into the world, learn spells from enemies that you battle with, both in open world and in trials and dungeons. You can learn a wide range of powerful spells. Unfortunately, this is not a job that you could run random dungeons with because they're currently capped at level 70 for the time being. But the thing is that this is a job that is more for a personal challenge class since they have their own instance boss fights for you to test everything out in, known as the Mass Carnival. But still, it's fun to be able to collect spells from all over in your own spellbooks and be able to use them through other means. A personal favorite to use when running into any kind of fates in my experience. Well, that was a long one, but that was a quick summary of each of the combat jobs that we have in Final Fantasy XIV. Again, to all, it doesn't matter what job you start with. You are free to experience and try out each game at any time in the game, and it can be a great experience to be able to level them up and enjoy the stories that each separate one has. It's always a good idea to at least try out one of each role, see what you think of it, and if you feel like you belong there. And some jobs you will definitely like more than others. That's just fine. Just test them out, see what you think, and pick the job that you like playing the best. There's a job out there for everyone, so if you aren't a maniac like me and have to get them all the way up to max level, that's also fine. Anyway, everyone, thank you all again so much for watching, and I hope this video was able to help you out. Hope to be meeting you again in Eorzea soon, and maybe we'll meet up in the Duty Finder or Party Finder as you try out a new job. Just something fun to do until we get the new additions to our ever-growing family of jobs in Endwalker. So until Sage and Reaper comes out, please enjoy the amazing abilities we have right now. So until next time, everyone, this is Fantasy Girl signing out.